Thank you, Dr. Armstrong, for those very inspiring words. Our next speaker is the Reverend Dr. Elijah M. Brown, the General Secretary of the Baptist World Alliance. His passion for justice has led him to conduct research among displaced camps in Africa and the Middle East, testify before the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission of the UN Congress, and to speak around the world. Reverend Dr. Brown.
Four weeks ago, I was standing in what they call the gray zone, just a few kilometers from the conflict line in eastern Ukraine, where for the last 4 years, war has ravaged. We met with the President of Ukraine, Prime Minister, and Speaker of the Parliament, and here we were just a kilometer from the conflict, staring past bombed-out apartment buildings to fields laced with landmines. We drove through villages impacted by violence, even as the UN Security Council was voting that very week to reject efforts to send peacekeepers. We heard the cry of the elderly woman who stood just steps away from a bomb shelter pleading, "This winter, should I buy coal to heat my home or food to eat?" In just the last few weeks, there have been thousands of violations of the peace agreement as monitored by the OSCE. This includes around a small community filled now with thousands of displaced persons whose Ukrainian community name translates as peace. The name stopped all of us as we realized peace is under threat. Unfortunately, as in so many others, part of the justification for aggression came in the name of religion. Political leaders claiming to be the protectors of true faith used religion to place peace under threat. In Ukraine, it was diverging branches of my own faith tradition of Christianity. But we saw another truth in that city called peace. It was religious leaders who were now courageously facilitating humanitarian assistance across the region and feeding thousands of individuals regardless of their faith identity. This evening, I recall the words of Jesus. Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons and daughters of God." In each of our faith traditions, there are sacred texts, holy narratives, powerful examples that call to us and challenge us to live in the power of love as peacemakers. Our faith traditions challenge us to be people of faith who work to build public peace. It is seen in the Jewish doctors and nurses in Pittsburgh after the anti-Semitic gunman was wounded in the battle with police. He was taken to a local hospital, and as he entered into that hospital, he shouted, "I want to kill all the Jews." But meeting him and saving his life was a team of 3 Jewish doctors and nurses. It is seen in the pastor and imam in northern Nigeria who founded an intermediation reconciliation center. Among their many accomplishments was the negotiation of the Kaduna Peace Declaration that ended retaliatory violence between the two communities and brought peace for 9 years. As the imam shared with us, quote, "Religion is more powerful than an atomic bomb. Religion is like a nuclear power, and it can be used either positively or negatively, depending on the driver." It is seen in Noru, in southern Ethiopia, whom I met several years ago. He described how one Sunday morning during a church service, a community mob attacked the church. The mob burst in, machetes raised, and the joy of worship was replaced with the wails of lament. And during that attack, he lost one of his hands. After receiving medical treatment, he returned back to his home village. But because he had lost his hand, he was unable to work. He learned that a person who had participated in that attack, in fact, had helped organize that attack, had a very sick son. And Noru said, because I am unable to work, and because his family needs him to work, bring that young son into my life. And he personally nurtured the son of one of his attackers back to health. It is seen in people like you and I, as we join alongside one another as people of faith, working to build public peace. Is there any doubt that in so many places around the world, peace is under threat? Even now, as we gather just 1 month before the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there remain so many pressing challenges that will require all of us to work together. The challenges facing this world are too demanding for anything less than seeking to live as people of faith, working to build a public peace. Just as it was when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was first written, millions have faced the hard reality of living as a refugee. With 60 million refugees in the world today, there are more refugees in 2018 than at any other point in the last 70 years. Just as it was when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was written, millions of individuals face the hard reality of famine and hunger. With 4 declared famines in this year, there are more people facing famine than at any other point in the last 70 years. According to the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, 2.7 billion people live in low-income food deficit countries. 2.7 billion. 35% of the world's population, 1 out of all 3 people in the world, live today as our hungry neighbors. And as we all know, hunger is a powerful force. Poverty does not discriminate, though discrimination influences poverty. Non-livable wages, underemployment, the structures of society imbued with an ethos of comfort and security can create conditions where hunger festers and where entire segments of our brothers and sisters live in chronic hunger. And we neglect hunger at a great price. Contexts of chronic hunger lead to higher infant mortality. Contexts of chronic hunger lead to less productive lactation. Contexts of chronic often correlate to a lack of safe drinking water and adequate sanitation. Hunger stands behind war and conflict as evil forces continue to target food sources. They burn down crops, destroy the harvest, steal the livestock. They inflict starvation and famine echoes around so many places, used as a weapon of war and a tool for control, often targeting religious minorities. Hunger can be commodified. Hunger can be weaponized. Hunger stalks failed states and failed neighborhoods as the wealthy overindulge, while the cries of starvation and famine echo from the corners of our world. And we can be the people of faith who work to build public peace. Just as it was when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was first written, the specter of genocide continues to haunt. Most notably in the declared genocide against Christians, Yazidis, Shabak, Turkmen, and other religious minorities in Iraq. This year saw the declaration of genocide and mass killing of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, the group the United Nations calls the most persecuted people in the world today. Genocide and Holocaust scholars maintain an active database documenting political and societal conditions that give rise to state-sponsored mass killing. Today, that list includes 30 countries. 30 countries where elements within the government could be planning the whole-scale slaughter of its own citizens. 2.73 billion people live in these countries. And can I ask a question of us as people of faith gathered in this room? It's a question I'm hesitant to ask. It's an uncomfortable observation. For next year, we will recognize the 25th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. And in these past 25 years, why has every major recognized genocide been led or encouraged by people of faith? Some of these genocides have been led and encouraged by particular Christians, killing other Christians and other religious minorities. Some have been led and encouraged by particular Muslims, killing other Muslims and other religious minorities. In the case of the Rohingya, which is still so early in its analysis, it was at least encouraged by particular Buddhists. Why are people of faith too often at the forefront of christening and championing violence? Why do so many people of faith bless the bullet, exalt the missile, extol nuclear arms, sanctify the invasion, and if need be, pick up the sword and gun and participate in genocide themselves? Now this is often even not about religion, but about power and dominance, arrogance and neocolonialism, and the rise of xenophobic nationalism, all wrapped up in the name of religion. It's not about religion, but it is for me. As the general secretary of a religious organization that has members in 125 countries and territories, representing 47 million people, it is for me a confession and a lament and a request that if you and I as religious leaders can return home, Karen, as you so rightly challenged us, and with practical opportunities, live into the ideal that people of faith can work to build places of peace. For it is also clear that far too often it is our children and our youth who are most impacted. Just in 2017, the United Nations verified that 21,000 violations of the use of children in armed conflict occurred. Where should we seek to begin? Where should we seek common understanding around the issues and challenges that must be faced together? Can I suggest that perhaps we begin with refugees, hunger, genocide, and positively empowering our next generation? And if I may be so bold, may I add just one last one? Could we also pledge together to address the reality of religious discrimination and persecution? Now, I recognize that there are significant differences in our diverse geographical, socioeconomic, and various ethnocultural contexts. I recognize that we draw upon different religious traditions and practices and understandings of what constitutes public peace. But trends related to restricting the ability of religious minorities from living out the convictions of their conscience is clear. Building upon data provided by Pew Research, here's what the numbers say. Over the last 10 years, the number of countries where Hindus face discrimination, harassment, and violence has increased 9%. Where Christians face these realities has increased 34%. Where Muslims have faced these realities has increased 47%. For Buddhists, 70%. For indigenous religions, 70%. And for Jews, 70%. In the last 10 years, every major religion has seen an increase in the number of countries where it faces discrimination, harassment, and social violence. And here I sense another uncomfortable truth. There are 25 countries with very high government restrictions. 72% of them have an official or preferred state religion. There are 9 countries with very high social hostilities due to religion. 77% of them have an official or preferred state religion. In other words, the number one reason why people of faith are being killed is by other people of faith. At a global level, the number one reason why people face harassment and discrimination, the number one reason people of faith face increasing government restrictions, the number one reason why people face social violence is because of other people of faith. So as we return to our homes, will we be those people of faith who work to ensure that the religious minorities in our communities also have the right to live according to the dictates of their conscience? And I know in my own context, this has not always been the case. In my own context, there remain significant challenges. But as I conclude, here is what I hope we still believe. That we still believe a person's conscience is a sacred space. That we still believe our faith traditions and faith leaders challenge us to press for justice. And that we can partner with one another as shared voices for a just public peace. We still believe in the power to love children immorally thrown into conflict and war, exploited for political purposes, and left without an education. We still believe in the power to journey to the suffering in this world and to stand with the marginalized and the discriminated, to press for the eradication of nuclear weapons and to work to end genocide and ethnic cleansing. We still believe we can be a moral compass, be a friend, be a protector of dissenters, be a sufferer along the homeless, the stateless, the refugees. We still believe we can be a voice for justice. We still believe that people of faith can work to build public peace. The question is, will we?